can probably answer some of your questions, but depending on what they are, I may not be the best person to...
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So my name is Justin Chabatana, and I go to Sarah High School in San Mateo, California. Sorry, so do you mind if we start the interview right now, actually?
Yeah, that's fine.
Alright, so the whole history of your Advocacy Lab, your duties seem very occupying and very prominent, so what made you think that this was your true calling?
So I really noticed injustice from a young age. In fact, when I was 12 years old, I was going to middle school, and I started to ask my parents why the middle school in the town over, they had kids of all different ethnicities, but in my school it was mostly white. And my parents said, well, you have to go to the school of the town that you live in, because we went to public school. And I said, oh, well, I'd rather go to that school. And they said, well, your school actually, you'll get a better education here because there's more resources, teachers are better trained. And so I started thinking about that and said, you can't even go to that school because you don't live in that town. And I started to really understand that education isn't equal for everyone, right? Because, we just happen to live here based on where our parents lived and possibly because of what they could afford, and that translated into a difference in the quality of education. So, so that's when I first realized it, and then I soon realized I was really concerned about justice in all areas of life, not just education, and so I started looking into how to create change, but I didn't really learn about human rights until I got to college, like understanding that there was such a term like human rights, and there was a universal declaration of human rights, and I thought that people should really learn at a younger age about this and how they could create change. And so that's how I started with a group of women, the Advocacy Lab, so that we could actually bring the program into high school so students could learn in high school about human rights and how to advocate for change.
Alright. Child soldiers usually come from a common background, just from a third world city or town engaged in dangerous conflict. Can you further explain the average case of a child soldier?
So I can't say I could tell you the average case, but I know that a lot of reasons that children become soldiers, well, first they enter because they're either kidnapped and forced to go into it, or they're recruited and they feel like they don't have other options because they're poor.
So usually desperation then. Sometimes.
What's that?
Usually sometimes desperation.
Yeah. So they don't really feel like they have any options, and so they end up entering that way. So those are usually the reasons. Sometimes there's heavy recruitment, and so you want to know the case for recruitment or for...
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I think that's those are the main reasons that they end up becoming child soldiers.
So on your website, it states that you've educated many schools in New York about various social injustices. Specifically speaking, what significant or memorable projects have you done to make aware of or alleviate the child soldier conflict, and what challenges did you come across during?
I just noticed my video. Hold on. Can you see me?
Oh yeah, I see you now.
Okay. Sorry, can you say the question again?
What significant or memorable projects have you done to make aware of or alleviate the child soldier conflict, and what challenges did you come across during?
Okay. So we give our students a range of options of what they want to work on, and numerous classes have chosen to work to stop the use of child soldiers in various countries, and they've done it in different ways. So one of our schools in the Bronx, Wings Academy, a group of students there decided they wanted to ask Senator Schumer to sign the Child Soldier Protection Act. That was about 5 years ago. And so they did everything from start to finish themselves. They called Senator Schumer's office repeatedly until he gave them an appointment. They met with his staff, actually, and a group of about 5 students went down there. They had done their research really well to understand who had signed this bill and what kind of support it was getting and what it was asking for, and they explained the bill to the staff member who hadn't actually known much about it, and they also explained that it was bipartisan, so Democrats and Republicans had signed on to it, and they really wanted his signature. And at first, they didn't think that Senator Schumer was going to sign on, but once they explained to the staff person that this really was a bipartisan bill and it already had about 30 signatures, Senator Schumer actually ended up signing on 2 weeks later. So that was really exciting for them. And so the students have done lots of things to raise awareness. They've held assemblies and film screenings. They've joined protests. Like, I don't know if they do it anymore, but have you ever heard of Gulu Walk?
No, we haven't.
Okay. Gulu Walk is named after a town in northern Uganda where kids used to have to walk to this town to sleep there so that they would stay safe and nobody would kidnap them from their villages. So they would walk there every night and sleep there. And so it became known as Gulu Walk. And so every October, in cities all across the world, actually, people would get together and do a walk symbolizing Gulu Walk. And they would raise awareness, they would call representatives during the walk, and just really try to bring attention to the issue. So our students have participated in that, so that's another way they raised awareness. And then another thing is Red Hand Day. Do you know about Red Hand Day?
No, I have not.
Okay, Red Hand Day is February 12th, I believe, and that's International Day to Stop the Use of Child Soldiers. And on that day, people all around the world take different types of action to raise awareness and call for an end. In countries where there's where they're using child soldiers, whether it's the government or a rebel group that's using them. And what they do is there's the sign is a red hand, and so people make photographs or videos or displays using the red hand. And sometimes, I think one Red Hand Day, they delivered thousands of red hands to the United Nations to ask them to do something. They've done petitions and all different things. So our students have participated in those actions. And it's like one day where the whole world could focus on calling for an end to the use of child soldiers. So it's a way to get a lot of attention and advocate to people who actually have the power to create change.
Oh, that's not okay. So,
But you asked about the obstacles, and I would say that it's a huge issue, right? And it's taking place all over the world, not just in Africa, but Asia, I mean, all over the place. And so it's really hard to overcome that. And even though students have raised awareness every year, we've got to reach the people in power and really call on them to create change. And so that's the biggest obstacle. It's such a huge issue, and it really needs a lot of work to get it to stop.
Let's see here. Every country has had a history of child soldiers, be it past or present. As of now, what countries have very populous child soldiers, and why do you believe this is so? I think you already kind of answered that question a little bit on how Asia also has child soldiers also.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of countries use them or have used them. Like Uganda used to be a country where there were lots of child soldiers, but now that rebel group, the LRA, has kind of moved into neighboring countries, and they are abducting kids from Congo and other places around there. But in Asia, in Colombia, all over the world, they're using child soldiers.
Yeah. Let's see. Today, many children's lives are being saved by organizations such as UNICEF, hoping to rehabilitate them. Would you have any knowledge on how the rehabilitation process for child soldiers works?
The only one I could really speak to is Uganda, because I did visit a couple of rehabilitation centers there. And what we learned is that the kids come back to these, not all kids, but some kids are able to go back to these rehabilitation centers before they get reunited with their families, especially if the kids have been abducted and living away from their families and fighting for years. it's really a difficult transition to go back home and live a regular life again.
Yeah.
So in the rehabilitation centers in Uganda, the kids, they go to school because they haven't been to school in years. However long they were gone, they missed that much school. They have social workers there that help them with the psychological trauma. And they also have needs because they don't have anything except for the clothes on their backs often. So they're rehabilitated with their physical needs too. And, it works differently at different places, but the social workers and other staff look for the family members and find, who's still alive and who can, come back and meet the children, or they sometimes take the children back to meet the families, but they wait until the kids are really ready to go back because the kids are scared, or my parents are going to accept me, or my family going to accept me because of what I've done, or just being away for so long. So it is a sensitive process for the kids, but unfortunately, there's not enough rehabilitation in a lot of places for kids to really, for every child soldier who has been away to get that rehabilitation, and sometimes they are left on their own, or sometimes they do get back to their families, but there's no one to help them with the psychological damage that is caused.
All right. There's been a lot of spark about child soldier advocate Joseph Kony recently. You've heard of him, correct?
Yes.
What is your opinion on him and all of his work that he's done and all the acts he's done for his children?
On Joseph Kony?
Yes.
Well, certainly horrible, everything that he's done. He's been around for, I don't know, it's 30 years at this point, and now he's moved from Uganda, where he abducted hundreds of kids. I think at one point it was 3,000. I don't know.
Yeah, 3,000.
So don't quote me. But he abducted so many kids. He just displaced so many families. Families had to move into. Do you know about internally displaced persons camps? Mm-hmm. Do you know what those are?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So he's moved so many families into these camps and deprived them of education and just being able to live in their home because of his terror. And so I definitely think that he needs to be brought to justice, and I think that it's up to the people who were affected by him to decide what kind of justice that should be.
Yeah. So it's actually all the questions I've actually provided, and you've answered them actually really well. So would there be anything else that I haven't asked you that you would want to tell me about the issue?
I'd like to know what's the project that you're working on.
It's for my social justice class,
okay.
And it's like our senior project, and how we have to just identify and make aware of a social injustice that's going on in society. And I chose child soldiers because it seemed really interesting how children are like the future, and yet how many countries don't really see that, and how we abuse them and deprivate them from basic needs. And I just really want to research that. So I've been reading like books. Like I've also read I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's called this A Long Way Gone. The Child Soldier memoir by Ishmael Bea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I've been reading that and some other articles on stuff on the injustice, and yeah.
And are you going to do a presentation for your class or your grade, or?
Yeah, we are, and okay. It's to get as much knowledge as I can before I can present. So.
And when do you have to present?
I want to say next month, maybe for finals week.
Okay. There's another book that you could read. It's a few years old, but it's called Innocence Lost.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I was interested, actually.
Okay. Jimmy Briggs, who wrote it, is a friend and colleague of mine, so I could always ask him to speak to you if you are interested.
Oh yeah, that'd be perfect, actually.
Because he's much more of an expert than I am.
Yeah. So thank you again for everything and all your time right now.
No problem.
And Is it alright if I have a follow-up question, if I can contact you again about it?
No problem.
Alright, thank you very much then.
Okay, good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.